So as we said yesterday, for visual artists, really exhibitions provide a way of putting your work into a relationship with an audience. And this really adds a whole new dimension to how that work is understood in the world, you know, the discourse that you are creating with it, how people perceive it, and, you know, spreading those ideas that you have given visual form to and created artwork out into the world beyond your studio. So today we are looking at places, spaces, venues, locations, and then also we will be covering presentation of the artwork, you know, within those spaces, which also covers the display elements. So a space to host your exhibition. And this is one of those things that often holds up artists thinking like, well, where could it possibly be? And the idea of it being so like big, and, you know, a lot of times we think of like white cube gallery spaces. A white cube gallery space, just in case you're not familiar, is really a gallery that is just really white walled, right? It's just like it usually has very limited features, usually just painted white, like a white cube, as you would expect, so that all the attention goes on the artwork and you're not distracted by, I don't know, architectural elements or anything else. So that is often what we think of when we want to have an exhibition. But, you know, if you don't know of any, you don't have easy access to any, you know, we're going to go through a bunch of places that you might also be able to have an exhibition, because, you know, art really can be, art exhibitions really can take place, you know, pretty much anywhere, right? You see it in the public domain as well. So to start with, I'd really encourage you to think about where you've seen exhibitions. So especially if you are thinking of having an exhibition locally to where you live, where your studio is, where have you seen exhibitions in your area? And there might be gallery spaces, it could be empty retail units, it could be other businesses, but where have you seen exhibitions in your area is the first question. I really want you to just like, what comes to mind? Who's shown recently? Whose show have you been to recently? Or where have you seen, you know, maybe you didn't even get around to going to it, but you saw some promotional advertising for it. Where have you visited and thought, I wonder if they would host my art show? Or you thought, this place would be great for exhibitions. Maybe they didn't already have exhibitions. Maybe something else was going on there, that, you know, maybe it was a wine tasting, or maybe there was a performance you went to see or something, but you thought, this place could be pretty good for an exhibition. I wonder if they would host my art. Can you think of any, does anywhere come to mind? I'm sure they do, especially if those of you that are in urban environments. You know, there are quite a lot of different places. So I would have you list out and think through what those places would be. And in particular, I want you to think beyond the gallery space, you know, for fast shows, as in like to get this moving quickly, businesses can be a really good way of getting your exhibition happening. And so I want you to think of any cafes, restaurants, coffee shops, hotels, maybe sports centers, you know, reception areas or lobbies for any kind of business. You know, it could be a medical center, it could be, I once had an exhibition in the reception lobby area of a sports center, other businesses, offices, corporates, salons. You know, where do you patronize even that you think, well, actually, they've got some good wall space here, or they've, you know, they're not using that part of the building, or whatever it is. Other suggestions include project spaces. Now, project spaces, if depending on how familiar you are with them, are usually like non-profit spaces that host cultural activity in a very broad sense. Sometimes they might be very specifically art related, but they could host other things such as, again, you know, performance, dance, music, etc. So yeah, those are usually, they're non-profit spaces, and they usually have that function of being like a cultural space. Then there are, of course, galleries. So are there any rental galleries where you've seen people saying, I'm going to have a show there? Or have you been to any? Have you used any in the past? and also empty retail units. So really on this, with this list, we've, listed out a bunch of places, but I want you to think about any in your area and to start jotting them down while you're with me now, or even when you're watching the replay, because it's, some of this work is allowing yourself to have that time, right? It's not learn and then go and do everything afterwards. While we're here together, it's a good idea for you to start, making yourself, actually do what would later on be homework. And as you go about your day in the coming week, as you're just going about doing the things you do, you might start noticing and paying a bit more attention to, like, the coffee shop that you're going into, or the hotel that you normally walk past, and actually go in and see, like, okay, well, there's a restaurant over this side, but there's a very cool kind of lobby space or a stairwell or whatever it is that could potentially be a good space for me to have a show. So here we've got cafes, coffee shops, restaurants, hotels, sports centers, reception areas, lobbies of larger businesses, project spaces, galleries, empty retail units, and the list could go on, which also includes studio spaces. A lot of custom purpose-built studio spaces, particularly around where I live and where there are new build residentials, they'll often have workspaces for not only artists, but like generally like businesses, right? But sometimes they also have like a bit of an exhibition or a gallery space as well. So you could also think about, like, well, maybe you don't have that, but does your friend have a studio in a studio complex that has like an exhibition space or a gallery space that you could perhaps ask them about? So just really jot down whatever comes to mind with that. So places some of my clients have had art shows include a brewery bar. One was a brewery and one was a wine. It wasn't a vineyard, but it was like what do you call it? A vintner, I suppose, right? So similar kind of thing. Corporate spaces. I have also in corporate spaces, project spaces, studios, their own studios, rental galleries, which is, what you're probably most familiar with, retail spaces like empty shops, or they've borrowed other people's retail units. I had a client who put their artwork up in a dress shop. So the retail unit itself already had an occupant, right? It was a women's apparel dress shop. But they had this sort of extra bit of space where they normally had like jewelry and accessories, but she was actually able to use that little section for an art exhibition. So it doesn't have to take over the whole space. But I'm only just saying that so that you can think small if you want to be agile and quick about some of these things. But of course, taking over a whole space to have your exhibition is a great goal as well. And then also malls or shopping centers, depending on what language you use, depending on where you're based. So places I've had art shows include a coffee shop, corporate spaces, leisure centre, public area, the lobby there, which was very good. Studios, galleries themselves, retail spaces. I borrowed a friend's shop for a pop-up shop, and then also online exhibitions I've had as well. So those are just some of the few. So, you can think very broadly. And I think as I plant some of these ideas with you, as you sort of listen through the training, you'll also start, like I said, when you're out and about in the world in the coming week, you'll start noticing and recognizing opportunities.